Okay. Right.
Hi.
So please tell us a little bit about yourself and your position in the academia.
I'm Gordon Patterson. I'm a professor of history at Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne, Florida. My university grew out of the American Space Program. About 30 years ago, a colleague who had been working in Pakistan told me that someone should write about the history of mosquito control. It was a moment of opportunity for me. So for the last 30 years, I've been traveling around the world looking at the different ways in which, in places like Germany or France, or especially here in Greece, how our species' war against mosquitoes has been conducted.
So what's exactly the interesting thing about, how come you're coming in Greece? It's your second time, and what is the point? Why, what do you find interesting actually in Greece when you come?
Greece is both in the beginning and perhaps the end of mosquito control. It begins 2,500 years ago when Aristotle identifies 60 species of insects, or when Hippocrates identifies in his work airs, waters, and places a fever that comes in the summer. We would call it malaria. Or when Herodotus writes about how bed nets, or fishing nets, were used to prevent mosquitoes biting. That's a beginning in Western civilization. But today, what really draws me back to Greece is that innovative techniques, collection of data, modeling, all of those things, and most importantly for a historian, good record keeping, and then the use of those records to develop in a sensitive, environmentally competent manner a control of six-legged, blood-sucking pests. That's what brings me back to Greece.
Can you comment a little bit the differences about the mosquito control the last century between Europe and the United States? Because in the United States you had a lot of tradition in mosquito control. We were doing the anti-malaria campaigns, and then everything stopped in the US, in Europe.
In many respects, as I said, I come from the state of Florida. Florida would not be inhabited if it hadn't been for mosquito control. In 1900, there were less than 300,000 people living in Florida. Today, it's close to 17 million. And the reason that so few people came to Florida was because of yellow fever, dengue fever, and yes, malaria. Without the intervention of mosquito control, Florida would not have been inhabited as it is today, or California. What happened in America is very interesting. The American mosquito control movement grows out of a concern first for public health and then for nuisance mosquitoes. In the 1940s, during the Second World War, the effort to prevent, among the Allied forces, mosquito-borne diseases led to an explosion of research first in Orlando, Florida, where the chemical DDT was found to be of extraordinary toxic properties. But that led to what I would characterize as a kind of pesticide mania, of spraying virtually everything. What is really remarkable about what happens in both Europe and the United States is in the 1960s and 70s, a growing environmental awareness raised the question of how can we control mosquitoes in a way that protects the biodiversity of our planet. And that's where Europeans in general, but particularly here in Greece, I've been interested in the way in which the use of larviciding, killing the larva of the mosquito, has come to be the principal way of preventing public health crises and reducing the nuisance level of mosquitoes.
What about the two techno giants that are trying? They're getting into the field of mosquito control. I'm talking about Google, and first of all, of course, Microsoft, Gates Foundation. Gates Foundation, they started to work in Africa, and Google from 2016, they're getting in this kind of sterile insect techniques. I mean, they're so much interested because of their brand names, of the competition, or is it because they find there an opportunity, business opportunity? It's philanthropy?
You're asking a historian to be an astrologer. You're asking me to foresee. In the history of philanthropy, at the beginning of the 20th century, the Rockefellers, the Fords, the Leland Stanfords, the Huntingtons, all vastly wealthy Americans, decided to take a sizable component of their wealth and to put it to public purpose. I do not know why the Google or Alphabet Corporation has made this decision. I do remember that Google began with the motto, "Do no evil." Perhaps for Google, and I have great praise for the Gates Foundation, perhaps they have taken that idea of doing no evil and turned it into the notion of let us do something good. Reducing the burden of insect-borne diseases is a good that will benefit millions of people in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and in the Americas. That would be an accomplishment. The profitability of that for those corporations is something that a mere historian can only say, I have no knowledge, but I am pleased that smart people with deep pockets are interested in public health.
So tell us a little bit about the DDT era, because that's its history now. And tell us a little bit about the American policy and all this kind of selling the American image all over the world through the DDT, mosquito control. Because you know that in Italy and in Greece, that was a huge effect. It had a huge effect.
DDT, in 1942, in November 1942, an American military consul in Basel, Switzerland, sent a small amount of a chemical that Paul Mueller had developed for the Geigy Pharmaceutical Corporation. They had developed it to prevent moths from eating garments. In November 1942, it was tested against mosquitoes in a salt marsh near Cocoa Beach, Florida, and it decimated the population. But a fatal mistake was made. They used it both as a larvicide and as a delticide, and the result was resistance. The other mistake that was made was DDT was used initially for what is called residual spraying within the window frame or around the doors. The mosquito would take a blood meal, land upon the door frame or window frame, and perish. That would break the transmission cycle. After 1945, not only in the United States but around the world, DDT became a pesticide that was used for tomatoes, potatoes, all over the world. It is a classic example of a powerful tool that could be used for public health, was misused, and now is removed from us. I hear a chicken in the background, which may be...
We must end up here and go inside, because we have a chicken, we have a woman,